Thanks so much for joining us on this wet and soggy and depending on what roads you had to travel to get here, partially flooded Sunday morning. We are going to talk about this morning the only miracle of Jesus that is recorded in all four of the Gospels. And that miracle is kind of commonly known as the feeding of the 5,000. And so if you have been here for a while, you know this, or if you're still new, or if this is your first time with us, one thing you will hear us say over and over again is that here at Murray Hill, your questions are welcomed. That's partially because we want to make sure that we are reaffirming people who are making decisions about if Jesus is who he says he is, and if they actually want to devote their life to him, that the expectation of blind obedience doesn't happen here. That we want you to know why you believe, what you believe, so that when you have interactions and when you have conversations with other people, you have the opportunity to share your story with them. So another reason why we welcome questions is because as a staff, we ask a lot of questions. We want to know why things happened or why things didn't happen. So today, when we're looking at the feeding of the 5,000, there are a couple questions that came up for me over and over again as I was reading and studying this week, and I have answers that work for me in my brain right now. Not that they're not apt to change or that you might have different answers to these questions, but we're going to work through this together and see what we can come up with. So my first question when I was reading this and trying to find out more information is, why is this the only miracle that is in all four Gospels? So what was it about this? I mean, all of Jesus' miracles were awesome. Like, you know, water into wine and walking on the water, and like all these things are they're miracles. So what is the significance of this that it appeared in all four Gospels? And so I think the significance of the feeding of the 5,000 has to do with the disciples. Because as we read the story, and we'll look at a little bit from different books, and I'll kind of throw in some information because most of our understanding of the feeding of the 5,000 is not from a single book. It's actually a conglomeration of different things that we find out from different Gospels, and it's a way less cool title. But I think probably a better way to describe this miracle is not Jesus feeding the 5,000, but Jesus teaching the 12. Because when we look at this story, it says that during the day, Jesus was healing the people. So all these people that he's about to feed, he'd already spent time healing them. And one of our other Gospels said that he also talked to them about the kingdom of God. So the disciples come and say, hey, you know, Jesus, it's getting late. You might want to send them out to the neighboring cities so they can get a place to stay and get something to eat. It's good advice. That's what he should have done. He should have been like, all right, guys, I want to make sure that you're all taken care of, that you're going to get a bite to eat, that you're going to get a place to stay. So I'll catch you tomorrow, same time, same place, you know, or I'll be moving on somewhere else. I want to make sure you guys are all taken care of. So thanks. Go find a place to stay. He didn't have to feed them. It's not like those people needed something else. I mean, he had been there healing people. I don't think there were a lot of people who watched Jesus heal somebody and be like, no, that's not enough. You know what you also need to do? I need like a manna from heaven thing, Jesus. I need you to do something else. Like one up yourself. Healing is not enough. I need you to also feed me. So why feed the people? And I think that what we'll see is it wasn't really about the food, although the people needed the food. It was about the disciples. Because when we look at the questions that Jesus asked them, and when we look at their response, I think that we will start to see some of ourselves in the disciples, and we can take something from this story that's less about the fish and the bread and more about our connection to Christ and how he can guide our lives. So we're going to read the story of the feeding of the 5,000 from Matthew. So if you are using the Pew Bible, that is on page 980 down at the bottom, and then we're going to wrap over to 981. And I would encourage you just, later on this afternoon or this week to go through and read all of the stories of the feeding of the 5,000 in all four Gospels, and you can kind of see where you have learned little bits of information from this and bits of information from that, and kind of how, for most of us, our understanding of the feeding of the 5,000 is really a conglomeration of all four Gospels and what they bring us together. So starting with verse 13, and we'll read to 21, and you can see the Pew Bible has the subtitle, Jesus Feeds the 5,000, a way better title than Jesus Teaches the 12. 13, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So just before this, you can see in the subtitle there at the beginning of chapter 14, Jesus had just found out about John the Baptist being killed. So think about what grief and what anxiety and what a tough time that was for him. So much so that he wanted to go someplace and be alone, or bring his disciples and just let his tight team, his best guys, spend some time alone. When he showed up there to be alone, it turns out it was the opposite of him being alone. There was a large crowd. And instead of getting frustrated, and instead of saying, "All right, guys, let's make a right turn and go find a different bank to land on," or "let's walk a different way," or even going up and being like, "All right, guys, you got 30 minutes. Bring me your most sick, the people that need healing the most. We'll get that taken care of, and then I really got to go. I need some time to myself. I need some time with my guys." It was not Jesus' response. It said that Jesus had compassion on them. And that word, compassion, makes me think of the Grinch Who Stole Christmas when his heart starts to grow 10 sizes or whatever it is. I should have checked, Connie, with you. I know that you guys are doing the Dr. Seuss on Groot. Yeah, so it grows and he gets that smile and everything, like compassion. Like you love people, you're compassionate. And when I think about compassion, I kind of pair that with empathy, and like he can relate to these individuals that he sees. We went to go visit Joel and Julie on Friday night and got to meet Liam. And on the way home, Erin was flipping through Facebook or something like that, and she said, "Oh, look, I found an article here, and it's like 10 things that every great husband does." And so I'm thinking to myself, all right, if I get 7 out of 10, if I can get a C, I'll be good to go. So I was like, all right, let's read it. Let's see how I stack up here to great husbands. So she started reading it, and I went 3 for 3 right off the bat. And I'm like, all I got to do is 4 out of 7 now. That's way easier than 7 out of 10. So then she read number 4. And I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something about having empathy when your spouse is going through a tough time. And I was like, so close. I was doing so well. And then you started talking about empathy. But she said something jokingly, but as I reflect on it, is 100% the truth. She said, well, you know you're really good at having empathy for James and Emily. I was like, you're right. I am oddly empathetic with my children. That's weird. I don't really have empathy is not my strong suit. But when it comes to Emily and James, like, absolutely. I want to make sure that they're taken care of, and when something goes wrong, I want to figure out what it is. We were at Bahama Breeze on Friday, and we got some coconut shrimp. And turns out James loves coconut shrimp, and Emily eats slower than a turtle. So before long, I looked at the plate, and there's no more coconut shrimp, and there's just tails all over James's plate, and Emily's eating like half a shrimp, and she's like, I wanted more shrimp. And I was like, it's okay. I need another order of coconut shrimp over here, quickly. But I think about, why do I have compassion? Why am I empathetic with them? And you're probably being like, well, you're their dad, moron. Of course you're empathetic with them. But I think about that, and I think about how Jesus looked at people. And in one of the Gospels, he said he saw them as sheep without a shepherd. And I think about Emily and James, and I can see myself as their shepherd, as the one who is trying to guide them and direct them, because at some point they're going to be adults that I'm going to have to let go, and they're going to have to make their own decisions. And it is my goal that through that time, I have done all I can to build them up, to make them strong, to have facilitated a way for them to have a relationship with Christ, because at some point I'm not going to be there, and they need to make the connection to the shepherd who's always going to be there. And I think that if we, and by we I mean me, could begin to see people the way that Jesus saw people, and the way that God sees people, that it would change how we interact with them. And I don't want you to hear me say that we should look at people with pity, because pity is different from empathy. But I know that sometimes I am really quick to see somebody and know nothing of their background, but immediately make a judgment call on them just because of what I see, or the interaction that I have, or what I think might have happened previously in their life. But I haven't been a part of their life. I haven't walked in their shoes. I don't know what kind of experiences they've gone through. And so if I am so quick to make a conclusion, or to fill in their backstory myself with no knowledge, compassion is not something that easily emanates from me. Empathy is not something that bubbles up. And so when I look at this story, I think that one of the most significant things we see, again, about this story being Jesus teaches the 12, is that it's significant for us to see people as Jesus sees them, to see people as God sees them, to make daily decisions to try to help connect people to the shepherd. Because as followers of Christ, we know the security that we have in that. We know that when everything around us goes crazy, we've got the solid rock. But there are people all around us functioning as sheep without a shepherd, looking for what they should believe, looking for who they should follow. How should they live their life? And as followers of Christ, we have a connection to the shepherd. And it should be important and significant for us to do what we can to help connect people to the shepherd. So let's keep reading the story because, Jesus is the man. That's kind of, like the greatest understatement of the day. But how do human beings respond when they are looking at, it says 5,000 men, so depending on who you read, this could be 15, this could be 20,000 people. How do you respond when you are one of 12 individuals looking at, let's just say 15,000 people, and Jesus says, you know what? You guys get them something to eat. My guess is they probably started looking at each other like crosswise, like, did you hear what he just said? You got a couple thou laying around? Nope. Because they talk about one of their first excuses is Jesus. It would take half a year's salary just to feed these people one meal. We've got 5 pieces of bread and 2 fish. So I read all 4 of these, and there is no backstory about this kid, but I was taught a backstory in Sunday school about how like a mom made this little kid a lunch and he's, toting it down here to hear Jesus talk and everything. So maybe that happened, but like we're talking about one lunch from one kid. And if you've heard me speak on multiple occasions, I work somehow peanut butter and jelly into a lot of my talks because I love peanut butter and jelly, but that's what I'm thinking about. Like, look around you. What if I had one peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And I told Gary, hey, I need you to take that sandwich and feed everybody. Wrong person. I'm the wrong person too. But I realize he's Jesus. But think about that's some crazy stuff to say to somebody. Like, just take this, or you guys just figure it out. Make it happen. And so excuse number 1 was the financial. This will take us way more money than any of us have just for this one meal. The second excuse, once they found the food, what we have here is not enough. 2 fish, 5 barley loaves. It ain't going to cut it for 15,000 people. So what Jesus does, probably shakes his head, like I'm sure he did many times with his interactions with the disciples, but he says, all right, bring it to me. Blesses it, breaks it, says, all right, you guys give it out. So you guys know I'm a teacher and I try to do math in my head. So there's 12 disciples, there's 2 fish, there's 5 loaves of bread. What's 2 plus 5, Emily? 7. There's 12 disciples. So, I don't know who got what part of the bread or if they all got a little bit of fish and a little bit of bread. That's the kind of weird questions that are in my head. But somehow, they get it and they start passing it out and passing it out and passing it out and passing it out. And really, verse 19, this kind of stuck out to me particularly this morning. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. 15,000, Jesus got 15,000 people to sit down. I can't get 100 of y'all to sit down when I got my communication card out here and I'm trying to tell you what to fill out. That might be the biggest miracle of all. 15,000 people sat down. He started passing out the bread, started passing out the fish. And it just kept being passed and kept being passed and kept being passed. And at what point did the disciples realize he pulled a Jesus? There he goes again, pulling a Jesus. This little bit of fish, this little bit of bread somehow has been multiplied exponentially beyond anything we can comprehend. And it's been passed out, and it's been passed out. And let's see if I can find where it's at. It says, there we go, verse 20, they all ate and were satisfied. And that word is related to an animal sitting at the food trough until it cannot eat anymore. So that's like, in my brain, like the painful full. Like I've been doing the Daniel plan, and one of the things I learned is full does not mean pain. Because at one point in my life, I didn't think I was full until it hurt. I know now that you can be full without groaning afterwards. But that word satisfied literally is they ate until they could not eat anymore. And then there were 12 basketfuls left over. And I think the significance of that 12 again is this isn't about the food and the feeding and the 5,000 or the 15,000. This is about the disciples understanding your math will never work, but mine always will. And I think that's our takeaway today is that when we look at people like Jesus looked at them, when we begin to have compassion for the people around us, we begin to make different decisions with how we interact. We speak differently, we act differently because we know they have the opportunity to have what we have. Jesus doesn't turn anyone away. He doesn't say, actually, you remember what you did in January of 2007? Yeah, I was there too. So you're going to need a couple more years of getting your life together, try to say a few less bad words, and then come back and see me in November. We'll be even. It's not like that. He is ready and willing to accept us and to accept everyone. And when we see people with compassion, when we see people with empathy, we worry less about ourselves and more about them. And if you've got an MHBC shirt, on the back of it, it says, it's not about us. It's a great title. It's perfectly aligned with what we see Jesus speaking and preaching and living, but it's hard. Watch commercials. Live in America. You are told over and over and over again, actually it is about you. And it's about what you want and how quickly you want it. And this countercultural figure of Jesus, we put number one in our life. And we strive to live more like him. And it's a battle because of everything that's around us. Everything that's around us tells us, you know what, that little bit of money is probably not enough to impact anyone or to change anything. Your little bit of whatever talent you have, whatever you think you're kind of good at, God can't use that. Our math will never work. But when we take what God calls us to do and we join alongside him, Common Core math doesn't matter. Old school math doesn't matter. Because when we join alongside the most powerful being in the universe, lives are changed. People are different. And they're connected to the shepherd. So I think today, if you're like me, you're reflecting on how you interact with people, how you treat people. How can I, Jay, figure out how to be more compassionate to people, how to be more empathetic with people? And for me, it's an easy answer. It's about being connected to Christ. Because there are times in my life where I am absolutely empathetic with people, where I have a huge amount of compassion, and that's because it's not me driving. It's God's power, it's God's love working through me. And when I start trying to add up the math and trying to look at the monthly giving statement here and saying, well, what if I did this, or I changed that, or what if we could just have 5 more people? None of that matters. Because when we decide that our excuses go out the window because we worship God, because we have Jesus, number one, in our life, that's when lives change. That's when communities change. That's when we can impact everyone around us for the glory of God. So I will challenge you as I challenge myself. Figure out what it is in your life. When are you compassionate? When are you empathetic? To whom are you that way? And how can you become better at it? There are enough people in this world tearing everybody else down. From the pulpit sometimes. Let's be different. Let's get rid of our excuses. Let's step up alongside the great things that we know God wants to do in this church, in this community, in this world, and just watch what he does. Let's pray.